Good evening and welcome to Crawfordsville District Public Library's presentation on Sedimentary Rocks of Indiana. My name is Steph Morrisette and I am an assistant here in the Reference and Local History Department at CDPL, and it is my pleasure to present this program for you this evening. Before we move into discussing sedimentary rocks, we first need to have a few definitions for some important items of this program. First of all, most of us know what a rock is, but to be a little bit more technical, a rock is an aggregate or a collection of one or more minerals that is naturally occurring and results from different kinds of rocks being formed based on the environment of their formation. For example, there are three main categories of rocks, which include the sedimentary rocks we will discuss this evening, as well as igneous and metamorphic rocks. However, igneous rocks, which form through a volcanic origin, and metamorphic rocks, which form from high heat and high pressure, typically underground, these rock formations are not ones that are specific to Indiana, hence why we'll be focusing primarily on the sedimentary rocks of Indiana. Now, geology is simply the scientific study of rocks, and then furthermore, sedimentology is the study of sedimentary rocks, how they were formed through various types of erosion or weathering, specifically when it comes to water and wind, how those sediments are transported from one location to another and then are deposited in the environment, and then finally over time through pressure, cementation occurs in which the solidification of the sedimentary rock is formed. So, with that big definition, we can definitely say that sedimentologists are scientists who study sedimentary rocks. So, why do people like sedimentologists? Because we rock! Ha 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 ha. I had to throw that in there. I love geology jokes, and this geode here is the perfect manner in which to describe how much I love rocks. They just make me so happy. So now, without further ado, let's get into some sedimentary rocks of Indiana. It's important to note that sedimentologists, or simply geologists in general, when they're out in the field or on a practicum or field trip of sorts, there are several unique things that sedimentologists or geologists do. First of all, they want to know what that rock looks like. And yes, indeed, what does it smell like? Certain rocks have certain odors, depending on the minerals that are in them. For instance, a shale may smell a little bit like clay because of the high clay content in that sedimentary rock shale. What does it taste like? What do you mean? Are we rock biters? Not necessarily, but some rocks, for instance, like shale, the sedimentary rock shale that we'll be discussing this evening, if you lick it, which sounds very interesting, you'll get a taste that's very chalk-like because of the clay content. So you would be able to taste that if you take it as far as licking your rocks. Does that rock bubble? In other words, if you added a few drops of vinegar, which is a weak acidic solution, to that rock, does it bubble or effervesce? If so, you may have an indication of the type of sedimentary rock you're looking at. We'll discuss that here a little bit further. Now, again, we can define these rocks. We can begin to define them based on, are they soft? Can I break them? Are they brittle if I drop it? Is the rock uniform in appearance? And that means, does it all look familiar or similar throughout the entire rock specimen? Now, as we mentioned, there are three main types of rocks or rock classifications. We have the sedimentary rocks that we'll be discussing tonight, as well as the igneous and metamorphic rocks that we won't talk about tonight. However, I will put it out there that if anyone in the audience is interested in learning more about igneous and or metamorphic rocks, please reach out to us here at the library at the Reference and Local History Department. We would be happy to put a program together to discuss these other types of rocks in further detail. So, sedimentary rocks. If we look at the upper image there are various types of rock, but we're not really talking about classic punk or hard rock. We're talking about actual rocks. And some of those sedimentary rocks we're going to discuss tonight include limestone, shale that we mentioned, as well as sandstone, and a particular type of coal known as bituminous coal. Indiana's sedimentary rocks are abundant throughout the state, mostly though along the southern uh, areas of our state and off to the southwest of our state. Sedimentary rocks are known as bone rocks as they make up the majority of the rocks we find here in Indiana. Typically, if we were to find any other type of rock formations, such as an igneous or metamorphic rock, they would have to be buried so deeply we probably would not be able to attain the depth at which they may be. And these would be geologic periods of time back into the Cambrian and Precambrian time periods. But for the sake of what we're discussing today, we're going to talk about the rocks on top of the rocks. And for us, those are the sedimentary rocks we're going to focus on tonight: shale, sandstone, and limestone. Some of you may be familiar with those particular types of sedimentary rocks, and we're going to discuss them in a little further detail and determine what they are used for today. Now, these bone rocks or sedimentary rocks are composed of layers of sediment, if you will, dirt. I think dirt is a little bit of a derogatory word for sediments, so we'll just stick with sediments. It also can contain dead plant and organic matter, as well as the minerals we had mentioned in the first slide. And so all these kind of compact down together and solidify or cement to form your sedimentary rocks. And the interesting thing about sedimentary rocks is that they have all formed in a depositional environment. By that we mean that they were brought from one location and deposited in another location, and at some point in the past, water was present. And then when the water evaporated after all the sediments settled down to the bottom and started forming layers, these stratified layers became known as what is called bedding. And so sometimes in sedimentary rocks specifically, you can see the different layering or bedding of the actual sediments or minerals that have been put down. And this can give rise to various colors or hues of some of the different rocks. Most of the sedimentary rocks here in Indiana are buried under from around 100 feet to 350 feet underneath glacial sediments. You may have heard of the word glacial till. Till is another word for sediments, and this till is just a fine, powdery sediments that have been brought down from the glaciers that receded about 10,000 years ago. So basically, all the sediment and soils that we have on top of our sedimentary rocks now were pushed down here from Canada by our last glaciation. If you look in the upper right-hand image here under the sedimentary rocks, you can see to the right side of that image the stratification or the layering of those sedimentary rock bands in that formation. And again, in the lower image, this image just talks about the different processes that create sedimentary rocks. So our categories of sedimentary rocks, there are a few, and these bone rocks can be broken down into three categories of origin. So, for example, an organic or a biologic formation of a sedimentary rock, we mentioned coal, the bituminous coal in particular, because it is only one type of coal that is formed, and it's formed from the compression of organic matter. So over time, as the organic matter is compressed, it starts to solidify and form that coal. An interesting thing to note here that we mentioned metamorphic rocks. Something that is just outstanding about the rocks in general is that rocks recycle. So a sedimentary rock, for example, bituminous coal, can over time through heat and high pressure be transformed into a metamorphic form of coal known as anthracite coal. And so there are some differences in those rocks based on how they originally formed. So rocks can recycle, and we're really not going to focus too much on that tonight. It takes all the different kinds of rocks to really talk about how rocks recycle. So rock on, that'll be a future program if we want to continue learning about rocks. But to move on, so we have organic origin of sedimentary rocks. We have a chemical formation of sedimentary rocks, which you may have heard of limestone. Indiana is very famous for its limestone and its ability to be used as a diverse element in construction. So how these limestone formations are, how they come about is when water infiltrates or percolates down into the soil and into rock cavities, there's a chemical change that happens because typically rainwater is very slightly acidic. And so it has enough of an acidity to break down some of the mineral content in the soils and sediments and actually change the formation and the chemical component and create limestone. Now, limestone can contain fossils, and as we know, for the majority of fossils, they are found in sedimentary rocks. Finally, we have clastic sedimentary rocks, which is basically just a rock that's formed from broken pieces of other rocks that have been cemented together. These examples would include our sandstones that we find here in Indiana and also the shales. The first type of sedimentary rock we're going to discuss in a little bit of detail here is limestone. Limestone is composed of calcite, which is also known as calcium carbonate, and it's a uniform combination of minerals that makes a very distinct and well-known sedimentary rock used for various construction purposes. For example, you might have a crushed gravel driveway or a gravel road through the country. Some larger pieces of limestone and larger boulder size have been, it's known as riprap and erosion control measures on slopes and waterways. So the riprap, or these large boulder-shaped chunks of limestone, can actually be put on the sides of slopes or along waterways to deflect water from eroding the soil and sediments out from underneath it. So it kind of preserves the life of the slope, if you will, and the sediments and the types of plant materials growing on them. The limestone that we have here in Indiana is known as the nation's building stone and is famous really all over the United States and in other places throughout the world. And this limestone here that's mined here in Indiana is solely used for the construction on our national monuments, as well as many courthouses throughout the country, specifically the Bedford Oolitic or Salem limestone. So we are world renowned for the limestone that's produced here in Indiana. It's always in demand due to its consistency and uniformity. We mentioned that early on in the program, that chemical sedimentary rocks can have a nice, consistent, uniform appearance, and so it's a dependable type of construction material. And funny enough, in 1971, Indiana adopted limestone as the Indiana State Stone. Here are examples of some of the national monuments that our famous limestone has been used for. We have the Lincoln Memorial, we have the Pentagon, we also have the National Cathedral, the Washington Monument, and even the Empire State Building. Moving on to our second type of sedimentary rock here in Indiana, we're going to discuss sandstone. And just as you imagine the word sandstone, it's a rough, gritty stone that feels a lot like sandpaper, but it's relatively soft and can crumble. As you can see in the upper image here, there's banding of this sedimentary sandstone. So you can see the layering and the bedding of the formation there. And sandstone can come in a variety of hues from brown and yellow to even red or grayish. Other unusual colors include pink, white, or black. So sandstone is actually formed from grains of sand and pre-existing rocks that have been weathered and broken down and then re-solidified to form that sandstone. It's fairly resistant to weathering, meaning it takes a long time for sandstone to actually go back to being sand or be processed through the rock cycle into another type of rock. So an interesting thing about sandstone is it can actually hold water. So it's that watertight that it can hold water as a reservoir within a depression in the ground, so to speak. Now, just as the name implies, you might realize that sandstone is used in the construction of making sandpapers as well as roofing shingles, and it can even be used in sculpting since it is fairly soft to manipulate, and is also used in both asphalt and concrete. Many of us here in Montgomery County are familiar with Turkey Run. Some of the sandstone sculptures of Turkey Run State Park are simply breathtaking. You can see them along Sugar Creek, and you can also see them through Rocky Hollow Canyon. Along with Turkey Run, we also have Shade State Park. There are a lot of sandstone outcroppings at Shades, two of which you can see here from the images. And it really just takes a long time for sandstone to finally break down and be weathered. And all of these changes that you see in these images, these have all been carved by water over time. Next, we're going to discuss shale, another sedimentary rock found here in Indiana. It's the predominant type of sedimentary rock found in Indiana and has a very high clay content, along with some other minerals tossed in there. Some of you may have seen these exposed outcrops along creeks. They look like plates stacked upon one another or very layered. And in the upper right-hand image here, you can see just a segment of shale. And then in the lower image, you can see some of that stratification. So it's very plate-like, easy to distinguish what you're looking at when you do see it. You'll recognize it. It can also come in a variety of colors, but typically you have shades of tan, brown, gray, and sometimes even green. Shale can be used as an alternative fuel source. If you've heard of fracking, this is the rock that we used through fracking to create an alternative fuel source. Shale can also be used for blackboards and brick making, tiles, larger sewer pipes that run underground through our cities and some of our towns, even ceramics and cosmetics. If you have cosmetics that contain kaolinite, which is a type of clay, it could have come from shale. And another easy factor to determine if you have shale is if you drop it, does it shatter? Does it break? And if it fractures easily, chances are you have shale. Here are two different formations from the New Albany Shale, which is down towards southern Indiana. But you can definitely see the distinctive layers there in the shale. And if you notice around the bottom portions of these images, there are broken pieces that have fractured off easily. So it's easy to break. Coal, we discussed coal as a sedimentary rock here in Indiana that's formed through an organic process of compaction and cementation. So bituminous coal, this particular form we have in Indiana, is extremely abundant in our state, and it's so abundant that it's the most abundant fossil fuel source that we have. Coal is black in color. It can leave a powder on your hands or clothing. In geology, they call this the streak. It's the color that's produced when a mineral or a rock is scratched upon a surface or leaves residue on another surface. Coal was once used solely to heat homes. Well, maybe not solely. There's also wood. But coal was primarily used in the 1800s and early 1900s to heat homes, also to power locomotives. Some of the early trains used coal power. And it's still burned in a lot of the different power plants and energy plants that we have here, not only in Indiana, but also throughout the United States. Coal here in Indiana was first discovered along the Wabash River in 1736. So we've really got a history of coal in Indiana. In fact, 80% of the coal produced in Indiana is of the variety of bituminous coal. And remember, I did mention that there is a metamorphic variety of coal as well, and it's called anthracite coal. So I'm just hitting you up again. If you're interested in a program on igneous and metamorphic rocks, we can discuss these details further and how sedimentary rocks can change from one form to another. Since Indiana is one of the leading states producing coal, it's actually in the top 10 coal producing states in our nation, and this is according to the Indiana Coal Council. And in 2019, almost 60% of the net energy or electricity produced in Indiana was produced by coal, and this is according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. If you look on the map to the right here, you can see that the orange or the yellowish colorations are surface mines throughout the state, and then the darker colorations, the dark black spots, are underground mines. And then the lighter shade of blue throughout that entire area to the western and southern portions of the state are where coal reserves can be found. And finally, the last sedimentary rock I'd like to discuss here are geodes. Geodes are a type of sedimentary formation that can not only be formed in sedimentary rocks, but there are also geodes that can be formed in igneous rocks. But for today, we're just going to talk about geodes we can find in Indiana. Geodes that we find in Indiana tend to be a little more dense or heavy than some geodes you might find in other locations around the world. But geodes are simply hollow or mostly spherical rocks that typically contain mineral deposits, most of which we're familiar with would be quartz. Some of you may be familiar with the purple variety of quartz called amethyst. And the different colors of the insides of geodes result from different minerals that have the water that's percolated down into the cavity and dissolve the minerals that were there, forming new minerals, and that mineralization can change the color of the crystal that you find inside. So the colors can change over time. And if you look at the lower left-hand image, you can see the banding throughout that geode. And geodes can form not only in hollow cavities within sedimentary rocks themselves, and then as the geode solidifies, the rest of the sedimentary rock may dissolve over time, leaving the spherical nodule of geode. But not only geodes, the round spherical ones we're thinking of, but geodes can actually occur in fossilized remains. So let's take a look at that here. This image is just showing the different types of geodes and their formations here in Indiana. This image is from the Indiana Geological and Water Survey located out of IU, Bloomington. And geodes can be very early proto-geodes, meaning they haven't really totally formed yet. You can have prime geodes, which are your more rounded, sophisticated, stereotypical geode. But geodes can also form in fossils. So fossils, through permineralization, can actually dissolve, and then the geode is replaced in the same formation as that fossil. And then geodes can also be very old and can deteriorate over time to where you may not even know that you have a geode. So I would encourage you to learn about the different types of geodes we have here in Indiana and the types that you might find along Sugar Creek here. I can speak from personal experience that I have found not only proto-geodes or early geodes, but prime geodes and even fossilized geodes of the different organisms that were once a part of the marine community that Indiana used to be in. So those are the few of the sedimentary rocks, the primary sedimentary rocks we find here in Indiana. And if you would like more information on Indiana rock facts, you can check out these different sites. I mentioned Indiana Geological and Water Survey. You can also check out the DNR Department, Indiana Department of Natural Resources, Division of Water Quality, the Indiana Natural Resources Foundation, the American Geosciences Institute, and finally the U.S. Department of Interior Office of Surface Mining. You can gain a lot of information from a lot of varied resources right here on the internet. I want to thank you all for attending tonight's program. I've really had a lot of fun talking about one of my favorite subjects, rocks. Who knew rocks could be so interesting? For those of you that have any questions or simply have a comment you would like to leave, I encourage you to reach out and email us at the email address provided here, ask@cdpl.lib.in.us. If you reach out with a question or comment, your name will be entered into a prize drawing for this book image you see here on the left-hand side, Rocks and Minerals of North America. It's a great pocket guide. It literally will fit in your back pocket, so you can take it into the field with you and use it to help you identify potential rocks that you find. And in addition to this, you can stop by the second floor reference desk to collect your very own geodes. So yay, we have geodes that you can come and pick up on a first come, first served basis from the second floor reference desk. And rock on, Crawfordsville, Montgomery County. Keep it real, and we'll see you for the next program coming up next month. Stay tuned. Thank you and good night.